Something's been on my mind a lot recently. Looking back at things over the years, knowing the people that I've known, and meeting other people that I've had the chance to meet, comedy is much harder than people give it credit for. Yeah, anyone can be funny, but not everyone can be a comedian. You've got your family members, your mama, your grandmama, whoever's hyping you up in your little circle of folks. But not everyone is meant to go into comedy. It takes, as I have found out over the years, it takes a lot more work than people know. I've been doing stand-off for a good 8-9 years before the pandemic hit in. Never really hit anything big. But, still something I'm passionate about and something that I love doing. But, when I first started, it was insanely difficult for me. I had to figure out, okay, I can't tell these types of things. I can't do this type of thing. I actually have to put in a lot of work over here. There's a lot more work that goes into it than anyone knows. One of the golden rules of comedy is to know your audience. And believe me, that one can and has undone many a professional comedian. They don't read the room, they don't read their audience. They're basically screwed at that point. Another thing that a lot of people don't understand when it comes to being a comedian is there are some jokes you just can't make. I'm a firm believer that anything can be made into a joke so long as the joke is written well, the joke is executed well, and the timing of the joke is good. And not just the timing of the delivery, but the timing of when you say the joke at all. You don't want to make a joke about a very tragic issue and, it be still a fresh wound. You want to time everything, because you will not get a good reputation if you do not time things well. That can and does undo people's careers. Another thing that a lot of people don't understand about comedy, and sadly even some quote-unquote professionals out there don't understand this about comedy. Even if your routines by nature are different and are technically written differently, if they all revolve around the same subject matter, it eventually gets stale and you just become absolutely just one of the most boring people or one of the lamest comedians out there. There are a ton of examples out there I could give for this one. But the most prominent one, because of how much they've run their own material into the ground, would be, Amy Schumer. She was hilarious when she first started, but she ran her jokes into the ground where that's all she was known for. And she's still considered a comedian by trade, but not apparently by skill or quality. Now, am I saying I'm funnier than her? No. No. She's been at the comedy game way longer than me. So she's definitely got more of an experience and repertoire built up. But I'm just saying, she's one of the more relevant examples of how not to run your routines into the ground. She's an example of how not to set your how to set your routines to be fresh. Now, something else that a lot of people don't necessarily seem to understand is not everyone can do stand-up comedy. There are, just like other job titles and jobs placements and all that jazz, there are bunches and totally, completely varying styles of comedy. You've got stand-up comedy, you've got performance comedy, slapstick comedy, you've got improv comedy. There are so many different things that are classified as comedy. Some are more preferred than others, some are easier to work with than others by comparison. Comedy as a whole still takes a ton of work, but there is a lot to choose from. Just because you're not good at being a stand-up comic doesn't mean you wouldn't be good as a improv comic, or a musical comic, like people who tie in musical numbers and songs to their acts. Those aren't required to be a comedian, but if you don't necessarily feel confident enough or strong enough to go through a normal traditional stand-up routine, sometimes throwing in something else you're good at helps out big time. Like, if you're good at juggling, you can incorporate juggling into your act. If you're an amazing piano player, you can incorporate that into your act. And, there are so many other things you can do out there. So, if you're looking to go into comedy, sit down and seriously think about it and decide what kind of comedy you want to do. Now, do bear in mind, things like improv comedy, while it can be done on its own, that kind is preferred to be done in a group, because then that way you have other people to feed off of when it comes to, getting things done and getting things recorded or filmed or performed at whatever location you're at. Now, and this one I've taken, in some of the comedy routines and performances I've done, there is another kind of comedy where it's, the nicest way to put it is roasting, but it's really, I believe the term is called bash comedy, where you basically just rag on someone or something, and in a comedic way, but all you're basically doing is tearing something or someone apart. And I've done this a couple times in my routines where I've, ripped on people like Seth Rogen, where, people like, where I'll go up there and thank the audience for, coming out to see me, and, it's just proof that even though I'm still a little guy, if people can still find Seth Rogen funny after God knows how many films, then I might have a shot myself. So, things like that. It's like some little jabs like that aren't so bad, but some comedians out there have made careers out of just tearing people apart. Actually, the proper term I believe would be insult comic. And there is a niche for that. People do pay to see that. But even that gets stale after a while. You can only go so far in the field tearing people apart and insulting people. That might bring you a few fans, but it won't make you a lot of friends in the community either. Because just like with any other job, you can't truly progress if you don't network. And you're not going to be able to network well if all you're known for is making fun of people. And so, that can and has quickly bitten people in the ass before. And, oh god, there's just so many different things about comedy I could just go into for this. There's a small niche that surprisingly has some demand, but like hardly any, to the point where a lot of people forget that it exists. Because technically it does fall under the whole concept of plagiarism, and those are what are called copycat comedians, where they will take an entire joke, an entire routine in some cases, and just redo it. Rather they change a couple minor details, or in some cases some don't change details at all. And again, there is an incredibly small niche for that, but that one, even by my standards as a rookie, that is one of the more least desirable fields of comedy to be in. If you're going to make it big in comedy, you want to do something that makes you or whatever group, or rather you do it by yourself or you're with a group, you want to do something unique, something that gets the crowd's attention, something that keeps them coming back to see you or your group. Copycat comedians, they lack that. And which is why you hardly ever hear about them until, a professional or whatever hears that they stole a joke or routine of theirs and, go after them for that point. They're kind of like, and in that case, they're kind of like trolls looking for the negative attention. But, yeah, comedy is much more complex. When I first actually started performing, it was about 6 years ago. No, not 6 years ago. It was about 8 years ago. Because I had done some comedy shows and like high school talent shows when I was little, but when it came to like actually sitting down and getting ready for my first, actual performance, I, sat down and I'm like, I want to be original. I want to be funny. I want people to like my material. And so I had to sit down, and it took me a long time to write my first routine. And just like with books or scripts or whatever, your first draft is not always going to be the best. sometimes, some comedians write out their entire routine word for word. Some people write it out as more skeleton frames. And, it takes a lot of preparation and memorization. One thing you never want to do you never want to look for a heckler. You never want to plan for one of those. It says more when you're able to bounce back organically on the off chance you have a heckler versus having something already lined up just in case. There's nothing wrong with having maybe a snappy comeback here or there, but you can go out there and watch so many different comedians with so many different heckler issues. There's no guarantee that you will ever be prepared for whatever the audience may throw at you. And it is a torrent and a dangerous field. Something else that's, something that anyone who wants to be a comedian needs to keep in mind is, if you're like me and you're in my age bracket, you can't start, telling jokes all about your life or your crazy family, because you might have a few good stories, but you have a limited source. Like the comedians that are famous for telling crazy stories about themselves or their families, because, they're generally older, so they have way more material to work with. And, one of the easiest sources of materials is just the world around you. So an easy tip is, don't try to tell stories solely about yourself. Look for things around you to make jokes about. Look for things around you that inspire comedy. Because one of the many things people don't understand is that comedy is everywhere. You just have to be willing to look for it. Now, something else that is a huge thing that you need to take into account is the fact that comedy is subjective. What you find funny, someone else might get pissed about. Now, is that your fault that they get pissed? No. But this is part of why I mentioned earlier that you need to read the room and know your audience. That way you can tailor your jokes. Even you can still tell an edgy joke, but if you know certain folks in your audience wouldn't like a certain phrasing, you can tweak it just a little bit different when you say it to where it can still have the same punch. And so comedy is subjective. So again, you might find something funny that I get pissed about, and vice versa. You could be telling a joke, about Karens in a grocery store, and plot twist, there's a Karen in the audience saying, "I want to speak to your manager after the show." Things like that, Then you just gotta sit there and be like, "Oh, lovely. I've brought this upon myself." But you can't let any of that get to you. You have a lot of planning you have to do in addition to the writing, the practicing, the rehearsing. And even if your first practice audience is just a group of friends that or several cities have locations where they will have open mic nights, whether it be for singing, comedy, whatever. So, write your routine. Use the open mic nights as practice to hone your craft. Never stop practicing. Never stop trying to get better at what you do. When that's the case, if you think, I got this, I'm funny, you're going to end up getting stale or screwing up or just straight up losing the motivation, because that does happen to a lot of people. I know for me, I had to do a lot just to keep myself motivated to stay in comedy once the pandemic hit. And so, because I used to perform. I used to travel and perform at conventions and things like that, having fun, telling jokes. And, I've got some minor stories I could tell here and there, but I'll leave that up to you guys if you want to hear some convention stories. But anyways, I've run my mouth long enough, and y'all are probably sitting there like, "Artimus, shut the hell up. I want to go watch something else." That's fine. I just want to thank you for listening. And, stay tuned if you want to, if you want to see more content, and obviously, And if you guys do want to hear some convention stories, then just, hit me up in the comments, and I will definitely start digging through the shit pile that is the, or I shouldn't say shit pile, I should say through the trail mix that is my experience with performing at conventions. So with that, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye!